Before going any further, I would like to show you what the Type B connector actually looks like and how it corresponds to the detail that is found in FEMA P-1100. The Type B connector is a flat piece of steel and it's bolted into the side of the foundation here and here, and then lag screws go through these holes in the top into a shim and then into the mud sill. Now a shim is always used. It could be, if the mud sill was exactly flush with the concrete, you could go straight into the sill, but basically that never happens, so you have to put a shim in. Now the way these are designed and tested, you can put a shim there and you don't need to attach the shim separately to the sill. So this is a very unusual application. It sort of defies most engineering practices, but that is the way it's made. I contacted Simpson about this, and it's also true if you look in the catalog. It says nothing about attaching the shim to the sill. Now let's go ahead and look at the detail. The image on the right is from the Simpson Strong-Tie catalog, and it represents the requirements for the Type B connector installation. And on the left, you see the installation recommendations for the Type B connector in P-1100. The first thing I'd like you to notice is where it says the new 2x runner, 4 feet long. This runner is the same thing as a shim. Now here you see it's where it's 4 feet long, and in the Simpson catalog it says it only needs to be 12 inches long. In addition to that, the 12-inch long shim does not need special connection or an additional connection between it and the mud sill. Whereas here in the P-1100 image, it says fasten to foundation sill with screws at 8 inches on center, length is required to embed 1.5 inch minimum into existing sill. It doesn't need to have that shim installed. They certainly don't need all these screws installed. And if you look at it from a contractor's point of view, this is just a lot of work for absolutely nothing. The next thing I would like to point out is where it says connector type B, used in lieu of detail 4 D1, where X is greater than 2.5 inches. Now detail 4 D1, that is the same as connector type C. Just click on the card above and you can read all about it. Now what it's saying here is that when the distance between the edge of the concrete and the edge of the sill, that is X, exceeds 2.5 inches, then this particular detail should be used. Now I'd like to point out over here in the instructions for the installation of this product, it says that the shim with the space is between 3/8 and 1.5 inches. And what that means is that the shim can be no greater than 1.5 inches for this product to work. And what it's saying here is go ahead and put a shim in that is greater than 2.5 inches. So this installation is in violation of the manufacturer's instructions. Here is another construction detail found in FEMA P-1100 that uses the Type B connector. I can't remember seeing this framing configuration in the past 25 years, but for educational purposes, let's just assume that this comes up sometime. My memory is not perfect. Maybe it is out there. Probably somebody saw this. So let's go ahead and see how this is set up and how it would be retrofitted. So here you see the Type B connector to the side of the sill. Now, as I said previously, there's always a gap between the Type B connector and the mud sill. So right here you're always going to find a shim. It never happens that they happen to be perfectly aligned like you see here. Now an easier way to do this is to simply put a bolt into the side of the block as you see right here, and that pretty much finishes the whole thing without using a Type B connector, without doing any other framing, anything else at all. Even though I've never seen that framing configuration shown on the left, in similar situations, contractors have done what you see on the right. So what you see here, this is a LVL, probably a 2x10, and then right here is some peel and stick flashing to keep the separation between the wood and the concrete. And here it's been bolted to the side of the foundation with all those bolts. And now the blocking and the mud sill are right behind the concrete here. You can't see it, but that extends all the way down. So we have blocking and the mud sill behind the LVL. And then what's done here is these connectors now connect the joist to the LVL, and they do this all the way down the line right here. Now another way to have done that is if you were to take some tight-fitting 3/4 inch plywood blocks and have them come here and nail or bolt to the edge to the side of the LVL. So there's a couple of ways to do this. This is a much more practical and effective solution than the one on the left. Right now, I would like to look at type B from an installation point of view as a contractor would see it. So this detail on the right from P-1100, this yellow, that represents the shim that needs to be installed, and this blue right here, that represents the type B connector. Now we come over here, this is the actual photograph of one. So this flat plate, that is the type B connector, and this is the edge of the mud sill. And because the type B connector must be perfectly in line flush with the sill, that can only be done by putting in a shim. So that's why the shim is here. And every installation that you see of a type B connector will have a shim in it. So here we have another detail in FEMA P-1100, the exact same thing. This right here is the type B connector, and then this right here is the shim. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what this entails. And from a contractor's point of view, these are fairly problematic. So in order for us to attach the type B connector to the mud sill, we have to fill in this gap right here. So that's where we need to put the shim. So what we do is we cut a shim, that's this width, and then we have to run it all the way along here. And then when we come over here, you can see that the distance between here and here is probably an inch. Over here it was 2 inches. Over here it's an inch. And this is real typical where along the same foundation line you'll see one section where it's the gap is 1 inch. Another part will be 2 inches. Another part will be ½ inch. So you have to measure every single location where your type B connectors are going to be. So what we do is we'll take a 2x4 or some piece of lumber and we will measure the distance from here to here. Let's say that's 1 inch, and then we'll go cut a shim that's 1 inch and put it here for our type B connector. Over here we'd have to do a whole different size. So this one, say, is 1.5 inches. We take a 2x4 and make sure that it fits. If it's 1.25 inches, we'd have to cut a 2x4 at 1.25 inches and set it in place there. So that's very labor intensive. If you're going to be putting in these type B connectors, you have to cut a shim for every single location, and they're never consistent. Right here we're seeing the outline of the roof of a typical 1,250 square foot house. It's got stucco on the outside, it's got plaster on the inside. Real typical Bay Area house that needs a seismic retrofit. So he comes in underneath the house and he goes along this entire foundation here, and he measures at 14 different locations to see what size shim it's supposed to be. So he comes all the way along here and he measures 14 different times. Then he comes here and he measures 14 different times. And then of course he comes along here and he measures 14 different times. You really need to make sure you're pretty precise. So you're going to have to measure every one of those locations. So you measure all those locations, and you come around here, and then you go outside, then you go grab a 2x4, and then you start cutting your shims. And this can take a lot of time. So anyway, that's how it happens, and it's just really expensive. Now fortunately there's another method that we're going to be looking at, which is a lot cheaper. One of the things that adds to the cost here is the fact that these crawl spaces are not very clean and easy to get around in. So as you can see right here, there's practically everything in the way. These big heating ducts you have to crawl under. Sometimes you actually have to dig under them. There's pipes, there's old pieces of 2x4 or flaming material with nails sticking in them. There's just, it's just horrible under there. So this is just one more time that a contractor has to crawl that entire length, make all those measurements, cut all those shims, and then to go under there again. Now the other product that is made, you just go in there one time, you install it, you don't need shims, and it's a much, much better way to do it. These Type B connector retrofits are very expensive because of the increase in labor as well as the increase in materials. Now, using the Type B connector is very much a disincentive for homeowners to retrofit their homes. The number one question we get, number one, deciding factor in anyone to retrofit their house that I hear about is how much is it going to cost. So if we can find some other cheaper option to do this, it'll increase the number of retrofits, it'll reduce costs for everybody, make contractors' lives easier. There's nothing better than to do something except this.